Well, I'm mixing it up again. This time, it's a Quagi. This is Jeffrey, AD7LN. Welcome back to the radio room. Welcome back to the radio room. This is Jeffrey, Alpha Delta 7 Lima November. And it's session number 9 of Elmer Time. And let's mix it up. How about you Tex? How about an extremely high gain antenna, very inexpensive, homemade, great for home use or field work. Very directional. And it's not a Yagi. Let's say, here's your typical Yagi. I'm sure you've seen plenty of them. Cut for specific frequencies, for the different size elements for whatever frequency you're running. And what if we turn this Yagi into a Quagi? Part quad, part Yagi. Thus bringing up the gain, making it more sensitive to receive, and lower noise. Let's take these elements out. And let's just say it was, see, how would we draw that? Something like that. Very easy to make, inexpensive. We can even make it longer. Let's make this with more elements, more gain, more directivity. What say you if we made a cheap one out of PVC, wooden dowels, copper wire, an SO239, and some copper or brass rods? Somewhere in the ballpark of 11 to 15 dB D gain, and it's less than 10 feet long. If you're interested, keep watching. Well, how about we make a 146 megahertz 6-element side-fed Quagi. High performance, in less than 10 feet long, part quad, part Yagi, lower noise than a Yagi, higher gain than a Yagi. Yes, it has a higher wind load, so you may not want to leave it out all the time, considering this is an antenna constructed of PVC, wood, But gosh, it's a great antenna. I made this antenna many years ago, and I had a ball with it. So let's start off with the construction of this 6-element Quagi. Beginning, you will need a parts list. So here I have written down or typed out everything that's needed for a parts list and the needed tools to construct the antenna. At any time, go ahead and pause parts of this video if you plan on taking notes or building this antenna. So let's move on with the next part of the slide here. So starting off, let's cut the directors to their appropriate lengths. Whether you purchased copper rods or brass, they don't have to be very large in diameter. They can be less than a quarter of an inch round. Something that'll easily fit inside and through the PVC tubing during construction. Here are the lengths. Director 1 is 35 5/8 long. Director 2 is 35 7/16 inches. And Director 3, 35 1/4 inches. Director 4 shows 35 1/16. So once you have cut those, it'll be time to start making the driven element and the reflector. And all these they're just made out of solid copper wire, non-insulated, and you just bend the wire into a square. The reflector will be a closed loop, closed as in soldered together, and the length of the wire to make that reflector is going to be 85 3/4 inches long. And each side, shown in this next slide, shows each side is going to be 21.43 inches long. And they are exactly the same, 21.43, 21.43, 21.43. Once you have a perfect square, you will cut and solder and make a closed loop. Once you've finished the reflector, move on to the driven element, which that one is 81 inches long. And the square becomes 20 1/4 inches for each side. And you will notice on the right side of the driven element, there's where you want to end and start the wire, because you're going to put an SO239 right there and solder the SO239 onto the wire. That will be your driven element. And just to take a closer look at this, it shows the top wire is where you're going to solder the center connector of that SO239, and the bottom wire that runs up to the connector, that will be the ground. You will want to, during construction, put this on the right hand side of the driven element, so that once it's completed, you will flip it over, and the threaded socket will be facing, and on the left-hand side, facing you, because that's the way it's going to be further on as we get into this antenna. So, next, we will get out the wooden dowels to make the supports for both the driven and the reflector. Cut down the dowels so that they are holding the wires perfectly without stretching the wire. And once you have them perfectly cut down, don't glue them immediately to the wires, because you need to install those dowels into the PVC boom of the mast, or boom of the antenna. Then you will put the wires on the wooden mast, or the wooden dowels. So next, we can start on the PVC itself. As you can see, you need to get out the T connector and then put in PVC on both sides so that it equals out to 112 inches. You may notice that one side may be a tad longer than the other, so do the measurements prior to cutting. It also shows where the drill points are going to be. For, if you start off, let's say, on the right hand side, the number 4 director, you would drill a hole fairly close to the end, and that will be your starting point. And then 25 3/4 inches in, you'll do another drill point for director 3. Another drill point further in would be 17 1/4 inches. That would be drill director number 2. And then between director 2 and director 1, you will have that space where the T connector is. So between director 1 and director 2, you have to make sure that once you have applied the PVC boom into the T connector, that you can drill the next point at 32 3/4 inches for your director 1. And then after you've done that, between director 1 and the driven, driven is going to be 15 1/2 inches away from director 1. And then between the driven and the reflector, that'll be 20 3/4 inches. And you should have some PVC piping left over to use as your mast to suspend or hold up the antenna once it's created. So from there, we can show you a little more in-depth on the drilling practice. You want to make sure that every director hole is straight in line with each other. For the directors to work properly, they have to be exactly in front of each other. So make sure you do your measuring and marking properly before drilling for your directors. And as far as the driven and reflector, you want to do a cross drill, 45-degree angles, so that you can install the wooden dowels through at an X angle. And you want to make sure that the drill points are going to be at an equal distance from each other. And take your time, do the marking and measuring, make sure it's proper before you drill. And once you have drilled and installed the wooden dowels, and they are exactly set and protruding properly, so that there's the correct amount on both sides, correct amount of wooden dowel, the same amount measured on all sides, you can go ahead and glue those dowels in to that mast. And you'll see by this drawing that you will have to offset the drilling points by about 1/4 of an inch so that the dowels do not hit each other while sliding the dowels through the PVC boom. It's okay if they touch, but you have to allow some leeway so that they can actually slide all the way through the PVC boom. So, and then do that for both the driven and the reflector. Once you have put those wooden dowels in, you can go ahead and proceed and install the wire for both the driven and the reflector at that time if you wish. And make sure while drilling PVC and installing each director, maintain an equal amount of radial on top and bottom of the boom. When adjusted properly, go ahead and glue each radial top and underside of the boom. And you'll see by this pictorial here, you'll have equal lengths of each individual radial prior to gluing on director 1, director 2, director 3, and director 4. Once those are glued in and you have the driven and reflector installed, you're basically done. You'd make sure that the SO239 is on the left side, and as you can see by this pictorial, that the coax will run up the mast and down the boom and then curve around and come back onto the driven element and connected. And the electrical tape will hold the coax and the rest just shows how the antenna should look. And that's about it. Enjoy the antenna. It's ham radio is an experimenter's world. Try adding elements. Try running it horizontal for a sideband. Go ahead and experiment. It was a great antenna when I had it up, and I got some great distance at low power. And I'm sure you'll do the same. So with that, enjoy. Talk to you again soon. See you again here on the AD7LN Elmer Time Radio Room. This is AD7LN, and I'm clear.